Hello everyone, Matt here, and today we're going to talk about A Plague Tale Requiem. A Plague Tale Requiem is a single-player experience that will take you back to the 14th century, and it will continue the story of Emitia and Hugo de Rune. This game is a direct continuation of A Plague Tale Innocence, which begins the story of two siblings. I also made a video review about A Plague Tale Innocence, and you can find it in my YouTube channel. A Plague Tale Requiem was released in October 2022 to the Nintendo Switch, PlayStation 5, Windows, and Xbox X and S series. In this video, I'm going to cover 10 good and bad things in the game, including the changes between the two games. And with that, let's start with a quick summary. After the event of the first game, Hugo and Emitia de Rune finally have a break from all the horror, but the break unfortunately wasn't very long. Soon enough, the two siblings find themselves running away from many people who wish to harm them, and that until they decide to find an island that Hugo saw in his dreams. This island supposed to lead them to find a cure for Hugo's dangerous blood disease. Hugo and Emitia meet new friends along the way that are helping them to get to this island. Unfortunately, the two siblings learn really fast that things in this island aren't as they hope that they will be, and now they need to, yet again, watch out for themselves from people who are wishing them harm. And with that in mind, let's start with the list of 10 good and bad things in the game A Plague Tale Requiem. We will start with the 5 good things. Number 1. Characters. The voice acting in this game is amazing. Charlotte McBurney and Logan Hannon, the voice actors of Emitia and Hugo, have a great chemistry. At least that's how it sounds to me. The developers made each character very consistent without many break of the character moments. The interaction between the characters are great as well. Although there are some characters that unfortunately didn't meet each other in the game, and I would have liked to see that. I personally felt connection with many of the characters, and it really helped me with getting into the game's vibe. I also want to point out that the first game in the series also had a great character development. I enjoy the consistency. Number 2. Arsenal. Let's start with a comparison, shall we? In the first game, there were all kinds of types of projectiles and other features as well, such as the Extinguis and the Varantes, for example, when each of them had a different use. In Requiem, however, they removed some of the projectiles and added some modification to existing features. My favorite modification are those for the pots. In the first game, you use the pots mostly to distract enemies, but in Requiem, you can use them for all kinds of uses. You can use them as bombs for almost all of the possible features, which makes it really awesome because you have all kinds of different options. You can throw an extinguish bomb to turn off a big area of fire, or you can throw a bomb that explodes. The variety is really entertaining as well, because in some cases you are able to create a pool of inflammatory liquid and light it up, a feature that I will highly recommend for the developer to implement in the next game, if there will be one. Number 3. The vibe of the game. I do have some complaints that I will talk about later in this video that are related to this topic, but in an overall view, they didn't mess it up. The game brings the player a dark story with love and loss. The surrounding is very beautiful, but also very grim. It feels like the world is not in a good place, and not just the main character. But even in these dark times, the game also showed the player that this world also have warmth and kindness. Just like in many other games though, there are some parts that you would like to forget. But anyway, the sound of the environment merged very well with the scenes, and the interesting conversation filled the empty moments pretty well. Overall, the vibe of this game is very dark, but it's the other stuff that makes it feel like a real world. Number 4. Story. As I stated earlier in this video, the story continues the tale of Emitia and Hugo de Rune. The story answers many questions regarding the plague and the prima macula, which is Hugo blood disease. The developers managed to build a very detailed and interesting background story to this disease, which tells the tale of a child that lived in the 6th century. It's worth mentioning that Hugo and Amicia might be blood related to that child due to the fact that the prima macula runs in the bloodline. And with that in mind, the player also meets a cult that is surrounded around that child's story. Fortunately, this cult doesn't know that Hugo is the child that they are worshipping to, which gives the siblings the ability to blend in the crowd and investigate the area. Things of course going down the hill at some point just as expected, and then they are going down a bit more. And all these things leads to an epic ending of the game, which I really enjoyed by the way, because otherwise the game wouldn't be as I expected it to be, even though I hope that it will be different for the sake of future games. Number 5. Enemies. When I say enemies, I mean all of them beside of the main antagonist, which I have some things to say about them, but not now. The enemy AI is much better than what it was in the first game, which makes sense, but it's actually really good and challenging. It's not as easy to hide from them as it was before, and they are very persistent in fighting you, which means that they will look for you in a specific area for a very long time. So if you're a patient person, you have some hiding quality time. Sometimes you will be able to proceed to the next area by running away from them without hiding. But be cautious because they still might get you. Every enemy has its own way of defeating, but in most cases you can defeat them with the crossbow, in case you got the bolt. If you don't have any bolt to the crossbow, well, that's the moment that you need to become creative, but overall the enemies are very challenging and very satisfying to beat. The 5 bad things. Number 1. Music and sounds. This is where I complain about the differences between the two games. In the first game, the music in the background was very fitting to the vibe of the game. It was a recurring sound of a cello, at least I think it was a cello, but anyway. Thanks to it, the game felt darker and more stressful. And in addition to that, you could hear the squeaking of the rats very clearly, which added to the stressing factor of the game. In Requiem, however, you can barely hear the rats squeaking if there are any squeaking anyway. And although you can still hear the cello in the background music, it's more melodic than what it was in the first game. It feels like Asobo Studio took away a very large part of what was defining the first game's vibe. It felt much less stressing and a little more mellow. Number 2. Linear. More than halfway through the game, the story felt very linear. It was mostly calm and didn't have the wow or the intense effect that the community was expecting for. Although it had some very cool and intense moments, those moments were mostly short and followed by a quiet and calm moment. This led me to be less invested in the story of the game because I wasn't intrigued by the calm and lovely moments. I was waiting for the rats and the puzzles. Handling the rats was very linear as well. There are a few good parts with the rats, but most of them are pretty linear throughout the whole game. The game eventually redeemed itself as the story progressed, which was, as I stated earlier in this video, a great experience overall. But I still think that they could make the first half of the game much better. It would have helped the player to have a stronger connection with many of the characters as well. Number 3. Upgrades. The game kept the same idea for upgrades from the first game. In order to upgrade your gear, you'll have to find a workbench until you unlock the skill that allowed you to upgrade the gear without a workbench. But gathering enough materials for upgrades is not an easy task. First, you'll have to locate the materials and the tools, which is not as easy as it might seem like. And then you'll need to use the materials wisely for a better gaming experience. And in case you use them unwisely, like upgrading the flexible limb skill before upgrading the recycling tool skill, you won't be able to take it back unless you save the game just in case you regret it. Just for the sake of explanation, the flexible limb skill allows Amicia the ability to reload the crossbow faster, while the recycling tool skill allows Amicia to turn jars, knives, bolts, etc. to pieces for the use for further upgrades. On the upper side note of this, the players can finish the game without upgrading the gear at all, but of course, it will be harder. Number 4. Confusing. A lot of levels in the game are very big and the players have a large area to explore. The problem is that it's not very clear to the player where do they need to go. In cases where there are a lot of enemies in the area, the player needs to work harder as to not alert the enemy, and by the time that you got to where you wanted, you realize that it's not the place that you should have gone to and it's basically an empty area. In this case, you'll need to go back and try to find your way to the right place, and you need to do all of this very slow because you have many enemies around you. Now, it is debatable that to take it slow is just another part of the game, but the issue is that it's not very rewarding sometimes because you don't always have any collectibles or resources in this area. I found myself wandering a very large area and gone all the way to the other side. While evading the enemies, I've looked around for quite a while, and only 30 minutes later, I realized that where I needed to go to was very close to the entrance of the area. It was frustrating. Number 5. Antagonists. And now it's the time to talk about my biggest disappointment in the game, the bad guys. The antagonists of the game are the Count and Countess, Victor and Emily, which are the leaders of the cult that believe in a child of embers. Hugo, in this case. After an incredibly knowledgeable and intelligent antagonist in the first game, I expected for at least that level of antagonist in this game. But unfortunately, the Count and Countess are underestimating Hugo's power and decided to do the very worst thing that they can possibly do. And that in hope that he will accept them as parents. And that thing is to eliminate his mother and sister. To be fair, they didn't plan for him to realize what they have done, but if you think about it, they should have realized that he would react the same way no matter what happened. Whether they would lie to him by saying that Amicia and his mother abandoned him, or that they died by falling down the stairs. The boy is a ticking time bomb and they know it. At least the Count knew it, because he fabricated the whole cult just to satisfy his beloved wife. I can't express how disappointed I am from these two characters, but I want to end it on a good note. Although they are very stupid in my opinion, and they are also some kind of a joke in compared to the antagonist of the first game, they did have a very good character development, and they did make a very strong impression of pure evil. And that was the list. In conclusion, the game has many positive sides. Although it sounded like I didn't enjoy it, I actually really liked it regardless of the downsides. The challenge that the enemies bring to the game and the different variety of projectiles had an amazing effect on the gameplay. I really enjoyed learning how many different possibilities I had in fighting those enemies. I forgot to mention by the way, but you can also control rats from time to time with Hugo's ability. The bad guys are tolerable and even challenging to fight, and I needed the patience to play levels where it wasn't clear where do I need to go to, without going online and look for solution. I would recommend you guys to play this game because it's a great follow-up story to the first one, and it's also a very emotional roller coaster, which is quite fun. Now if you play this game, please let me know what do you think about it in the comment below. That's all for the video. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, please consider to subscribe and check out my other content as well. Stay well everyone, and don't forget, enjoy your games.